Hey guys, I am Peter Zhang. I'm an animator at Rooster Teeth, and I'm here with my good friend Kevin Harger to talk about a really cool fight scene that I think really inspired both of us. It's the final fight scene from Sword of the Stranger, and yeah, I mean I think that's all I got. Kev,
I'm
can you?
Kevin,
Yeah.
Kevin Harger. I used to work with Peter over at Rooster Teeth in Austin. Um, that was about, I want to say, 9 months ago that I left Rooster Teeth to move out to the Sunshine State. Or is that Florida? No, yeah. Damn. Okay, obviously out of California, but
I
I'm
can I can
getting
I can cut that out.
So yeah, Golden State. Here we are, baby.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I came out here to. I was a story artist at Rooster Teeth. Um, kind of have a little bit of a roundabout path in the entertainment industry, but I love making art. I love telling stories and um, movies, anime. It's kind of all my jam. Now I'm working as a biz dev artist over at a little studio called Lex and Otis in Glendale, and making some badass Netflix shows. Um, so yeah, that's what I'm working on now, and I'm very excited to sit down with my good friend here and talk about one of our favorite fight scenes that has been done in I think the history of anime.
Hell yeah. Kev, when you first watched this, what did you think of like the overall fight and like what was it about this fight that really like, grabbed you and really like inspired you?
A little bit of a caveat for me. Um, I, I went on like an anime hiatus for about 15 years of my life. Um, I didn't watch. I watched Dragon Ball Z when I was a kid, and then when I turned about 14, probably, I was like, "Man, I'm too cool for this anime stuff." And then I started like, I think I lost my way, honestly, Peter. I think that's what happened. I think that I think I was meant to be watching anime that whole time,
And
and I
Rooster Teeth brought you back.
Rooster Teeth brought me back, man.
Rooster
That's
Teeth
exactly
saved your life.
right. I found anime again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been watching it again for the past few years. Got super obsessed with a few shows. There's a ton of stuff that I haven't seen still. Um, so that is that's kind of the caveat, is that there's like a lot of great fight scenes out there that I haven't seen,
Yeah.
and like also fight scenes. While I love working on them and analyzing them, I've only been doing it for really a short amount of time, and it hasn't been my focus for too long.
Right. By the way, Kevin boarded a lot of fights since Ruby 4. So it's that Ruby 4 through 8, I think, right now. So a good chunk of those you can thank Kevin. And I believe, like, Sword of the Stranger was something that you happened upon as you were researching fights for your storyboards. Is that right, Kev? Or did you find it before?
That's absolutely right. Yeah. Damn, 4 through 8. When you say it that way, it sounds like a really long time.
Yeah, you're an old man, Kev.
Dude. Um, yeah, working on Ruby was a lot of fun, and I took a online course for storyboarding,
Oh,
which
yeah.
I'm going to plug right now, and hopefully Steve On will give me some residuals. Yeah, Steve On's action storyboarding class. I'm pretty sure he's still teaching it out there, and it's one of the best on that you can find over the internet.
Yeah.
He's a action adventure story artist from Korra and Voltron. Um, and a number of other shows. So he one of the big lessons from in his plan was or in his class was over this particular fight scene. That's when I found it. Um, Maybe you know what? It might have even been like Austin Hardwick that told me about it first.
Yeah, of course. He knows all of the anime stuff, man. He knows he
Yeah,
if you mention it, he's seen it. You know.
I think it was him, dude. I'm pretty sure. And then Steve Vaughn brought it up in the class, and I was like, okay, this must be important. So yeah, then I just got obsessed with it because to me, what I like about it so much is that it feels like a live action fight.
Yeah.
Um, all of the everything they're doing with the camera is just so grounded and believable, um, and and it makes it just so much more intense because you feel the stakes, you
Oh yeah.
feel the pain, the fatigue, um, and I watched this scene a countless number of times before I saw the movie. You probably in the same boat.
Same. Yeah. I just watched it last week, but I saw
Yeah,
it for the first time like 3 years ago. If you just Google best sword fight scene, it'll show up like in every single list that you're gonna find on YouTube.
that's right.
But no, I definitely agree, Kev. Like it's there's like this realness to it that's like really pushed, but it still feels like like there are moments where you could really feel that No Name is like tired. Like you can see it, and at the same time, I feel like the I think the thing that struck me the most when I first saw this was that they interact with their environment like every other shot. And that's such a really cool way to ground your fights is to have them fight against the wind or like the getting their footing in one or two shots or like interacting with the objects around them. And I think like when you do that, it's just impressive to me. I think because so often like you can just you can have a fight with two characters and they might never touch like anything else in this scene. And I think that's just like a one of the really cool things that struck me was that like the snow is like a big part of this fight where it's like they're slipping all over the place and there's like the weird way the wooden beams are that they have to like navigate through, and which I think just like brings up the intensity because they're not just fighting against each other, they're fighting against their environment, right? So it's like there's so many layers to why I think this fight scene just works so well.
I think that's an awesome point that you bring up, man, because I think that what it makes me think of an analogy, and you got to bear with me here, because I'm married, so we have to compromise on the TV shows we watch a lot, so it almost always ends up being a sitcom.
Okay.
And so what I'm trying to get at here is that there's something really great and concise, and about the limitations that sitcoms use in their writing. So rather than like let's have these two characters fight and they can do whatever they want,
Right. Yeah.
let's put them in a situation, um, and then we have to think of how would they act in this situation.
Yeah. Yeah. You're putting limits on what you can do um, in this scene, right? And you have to sort of it's weird to think about it this way, but like you have to give them problems to work around. And
Yeah,
the setting could be one of those things where they're trying to catch their footing all the time or they're trying to gain the higher ground all the time and it becomes a really important part or an important aspect of the fight that they're navigating around, not just trying to kill each other, but like there's also that other level that like they're operating around. Like
absolutely.
yeah, and I think honestly, as an animator, when I'm presented with those limiters, I guess it's actually a lot more fun for me because like now I have to really think about why I'm doing things and like how I can feasibly maneuver, around these problems, but at the same time keeping the action and the pacing and the camera, at a high intensity level. So um, I think it's fun to watch, and for animators, like it's also fun to work on for sure. Kev, like as a storyboard artist, when you were doing fights, like how did you think about shots like these where you're trying to get the audience to feel the tension between the two fighters, like and what do you think of how they did it here?
In staging, a fight and leading the audience into it. That's probably the most important part of the fight. Um, the hits and the choreography are all exciting um, and cool factors, but if we don't feel the stakes or feel the emotion that the scene is about, then all of that flourish and flowery choreography doesn't really mean anything.
Hmm.
So these shots leading us in, they give us that they give us that crescendo, that thing that that suspense that builds, that we start to want them to get into the fight more and more. And this part where he's showing him warm up his fingers is brilliant to
I love
me,
it. Yeah.
because when have we ever seen that? I want to say it's never been in an animated show or movie that I've seen. Um, I want to say that's probably something that they pulled from live action, probably from some badass like obscure movie.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's so specific that, and it brings so much just realism to like I love the ability of the artists and the writers to jump from a detail as minute as the warmth of the fighter's fingers
Mm.
to the macro view of like this epic fight.
Yeah. It's a really cool shot, but I do think it's also a thing where, there's this added story component where, if you've seen the movie, there's like a backstory with uh, this piece of cloth on the sword, and it's essentially, spoiler alert for the movie. This character, his name is No Name. He used to be a samurai for a feudal lord, and one of the missions that he had to carry out was to kill an innocent child of a rival lord. And so after he had done that, he felt so guilty that after he had done it, this cloth right here, he used that cloth. I think it was the kid that he killed. He used that cloth to tie up his sword so that he couldn't draw his sword ever, because he just felt so bad about it. And that was he has not drawn his sword the entire movie essentially. And so when the movie starts, he meets this kid right here, and that kid reminded him so much of the kid that he murdered that he decided to help him out. And so they built their relationship throughout the entire movie, and it's built up to this point where he wants to save this kid from these assassins. And so a couple scenes prior to this, he had just drawn the sword, and it was like a really cool moment, really super anime. And I think this shot is just so integral to just sort of setting up the fight, but at the same time, it's also like, oh hey, this is a sword that he has just drawn for the first time like in years. So like it's a really great shot because of the character and also the plot behind it. And definitely, Kev, I agree, man. Like I feel like the best fights, obviously, it's not like the physical things that happen during a fight are just sort of like they're just sort of representations of the actual struggle between the two people, and not necessarily it's not necessarily the cool action itself, but the action itself follows along the arc of the whatever they're fighting for. when I was framing through this, Kev, I thought it real interesting where they're walking, does this cool thing with the sword, squares off, and then it goes to uh, a close up of his face, and then it cuts to a close up of his face, but it's mostly of his eyes, and I thought that was really cool because if I had done this fight scene, I probably would have like done this shot exactly as it is, and then probably done a mirror of it with this shot. But this shot they zoomed in, so it doesn't show his mouth and it shows just his eyes, and I just thought that was really interesting. Any thoughts on that, Kev, from a storyboarder point of view?
For sure, man. Yeah, you bring up a good point. I think um, one of my favorite principles in cinematography and storyboarding I learned from a book called um, called well,
Is
that'd be
it
good to
is
know.
it the visual story?
Oh, what? How did you do that?
We talked about it once. I actually had to read that book for a class in college, and I saw you reading it one day at work, and
Oh my God.
I was like, hey, bro, I read this book. Then we talked about
That's
it
a,
a little
that's
bit.
a throwback. Holy
Yeah,
crap.
it's a great book.
I can't believe. Yeah, I think there are secrets of filmmaking in that book that if you haven't read it, just do yourself a favor,
I
and
agree.
it's pretty fundamentally like will change the way that you see cinematography and staging.
Yeah.
But like there's a big theme that runs through the book called contrast versus affinity, and affinity is just the opposite of contrast. It's the likeness of two things.
Hmm.
And so um, as we're starting this scene, our shots have a lot of affinity to them. So Mr. No Name is like this big in frame, and then as we cut to here, he's also the same size, um, which you're not going to find later in the fight when things pick up. That because that's very calming um, and it not intense to cut from a character being one size and cut to the other character being the exact same size.
Hmm.
It
Well,
lowers the
they're
that
also of relative like sort of in equal standing right now because they're not as injured as they go on in the fight, and right now neither has more power than the other. They're sort of like standing off, and it's shown that visually by the same framing and same size in the shot. And so
yeah
is this so like so when we cut to the close up and then we cut to the eyes, they're ramping up the contrast, right, Kev?
that's exactly right.
Ah,
And then it continues to ramp it up, and so we're starting to get an increased intensity just by the contrast of this shot to this shot being slightly more than the contrast of this shot to this shot,
yeah,
and um, and like you were saying that they're very equal at this point. I want to say like going from here to here makes us feel that I don't. What's the bad guy's name? You remember?
I don't know. It starts with an L. He's just the bad guy. I don't
Yeah, generic. Insert generic bad guy.
know.
He not like he has a little bit more power in this situation is what that makes me feel.
Why is that? Because he's larger, like his
Yeah,
eyes are larger.
yeah. It's like a slightly lower angle. He's got more dominance over the frame,
Yeah.
but that's all subjective.
No, I think a lot of the decisions they make are just like a feeling kind of a thing, you know.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, let's get into the fighting, Kev, because I know you're short on time. Um, Good. Oh, yeah.
Dope.
Dude, it's so fucking good every time. The I think the second thing about this fight that really struck me was just the really cool, like just the pacing of everything. So especially if you watch this section, they're ramping up the action, and you can kind of feel that as they clash. And I would say that the camera is not doing anything crazy, uh, uh, and it sort of has this sort of slow pace to it. They even have a beat so that they could like have a really cool pose and look at each other. And then it goes into, ramping up the fighting, and I think the camera is also starting to move a lot more. And you're getting this flurry of movement, and this is just high intensity action, action, action. This is a really cool shot that I'm going to talk more about later that I really love. And then this attack happens, and then they break apart, and then you have a beat to catch your breath as an audience, and I really felt that, like I felt them come in to the clash, and then all of this really cool action happening, and then you get to take a breath afterwards because it was just so much. It was just so much awesomeness that you had to take a breath.
Yeah, the pacing's incredible. They yeah, they know that this is really intense and a lot to take in, and it deserves sort of like a pause and a breath for us to sort of like it's like post mortem in the middle of a fight. Like
Yeah,
what
you're
just
just like, oh,
happened?
what just happened? It was awesome.
Yeah,
Whew. You know.
yeah, and that's how like actual fights happen. Um, like I, I don't know. I've seen more fights in person than I would have liked to back in high school. I don't know. It was like a big thing in my high school, but like people were like beating the shit out of each other, but they don't just go at it for like 2 minutes and
Yeah.
then like okay we're done now.
Right.
It's like they go at it for 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and then take like a 5 minute break and get back into it.
Right. Yeah. No.
Um,
Like, I feel like if you fought this intensely the whole entire time, you're gonna get winded super quick, and then it's just over for you. Like there's definitely a pacing, and I think that adds to that realism that you mentioned about this fight, Kev, where it's just like they just did a lot of stuff, and now they're taking a moment to like literally breathe, like right here. You
yeah.
know. Um, and it's a welcome break, as a viewer as well. There's one thing that happens here, Kev, that I was going to ask you about because I think you have more experience with shot sequencing, let's say. So going from this shot right here, Kev. So he does this cool thing, and then he goes right. This is like the last pose ish, and he's sort of moving, screen left, and then the next shot they start off with this frame.
Uh
It
huh.
They're framing up just a piece of the environment, like this pole right here,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the camera sort of pans to where the fight is.
Yeah.
And it does create this like movement of the camera that starts to feel very handheld and very fast. um, but when you watch it at speed, you don't really notice it very much. But I was just
Right.
wondering your thoughts on that, Kev, when you're doing an action scene. um, and there's obviously an action happening. He's like going towards the guy, and he's doing a spinning move. um, for what reason would focus on like a post and then to the action? What do you think is the reasoning behind this? Because I think it adds to the pacing, and it's great and all, but But let me get your thoughts as a storyboard artist.
Well, Peter, I think what that post represents is the might of our hero. No, no. Okay, so it's a very it's a confusing shot, no doubt. There, it almost feels like we're missing something, um, and but it works. It works really well because I think that what they're trying to do here is put us well. Um, this brings up a good point, which is POV and perspective in any scene. Um, but in a fight scene in particular, we are experiencing this through No Name's POV.
Okay.
Um, whether we are seeing like a camera angle from where he actually is not necessarily what I mean, but this whole scene, we feel as if we are with him. At least we should. And so I think that whenever they can, what they're just trying to do is make us feel what No Name would feel in this scenario. So what the bad guy does here is this spin move where it's like spins the sword twice, then spins himself, and it's very disorienting.
Right. Like he's trying to figure out like, oh, what is this guy doing? Like
Exactly. And
okay.
which direction is he coming from?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, definitely
it,
if you've watched the movie, this guy spins all the fucking time.
it
Like
spins all the time.
yeah.
I would say if I storyboarded this panel, it would not get past the director. That's the problem.
Right.
Uh, this would the director would say, "Cool, bro. So where'd our characters go?" Uh, a lot has to happen in animation with that kind of stuff,
yeah.
and, I want to say that they were probably heavily referencing actual footage that they had shot, right? Um, and then they probably tried some stuff where they had the camera real low and like swung it around and just to see what that would look like. Because the specificity of like this shot, I don't know, it's the kind of thing where it was like if you tried to pitch it out of your own brain, nobody would accept it.
Right.
No, that's dumb.
Right.
But if we are constantly pulling reference from the real world, we're always going to be coming up with things that we would never think of on our own. So,
Yeah. No, it definitely works, and I think I agree with you, man, because it is sort of like this really fast movement where it definitely mimics the the assassin guy's spin attack move, and the thing is like it works, and I think half of the things that you decide to do when you're doing an animation fight is or just a fight in general is like what does it feel like, does it feel right? And I think that's all that really matters at this point. It's like, oh yeah, that definitely felt like it was moving the pace of the fight. Oh dude, okay, so right here, Kev. Oh,
yeah.
I love this one move that he does right here, and it goes into the next shot as well. Um, so this move right here does this, and then he does this spinning attack, right?
Hell
And
yeah.
No Name recoils. From an animation perspective, dude, this is perfect. Uh,
Perfect.
and it's because as I'm the more that I do fight scenes, the more I realize like it's not so much that I'm trying to make the characters as real as possible, but I am also directing the audience's attention. And so it's sort of this fine balance between like, hey, I need to make this as fast and punchy and exciting as possible, versus I need to slow down for the audience to sort of get what I'm doing. Because if you're animating fast, fast, fast action all the time, nothing's gonna read very well, you know? And so with this action right here, let me see if I can draw. I hope I can. Yes, I can. All right, cool. So he does this move, and then I'm talking the assassin guy. So he does that attack, and he's gonna start to spin. Okay, and if you look at, let me use another color for No Name. If you look at No Name's pose right here, so he ends in this pose right here after recoiling from the attack, and now the assassin guy is about to start spinning a lot for his next attack. Once you cut to this scene, notice No Name's pose the entire time. It's gonna be essentially the same thing, but assassin dude is gonna spin a lot, and so in animation, your eye is gonna focus on the thing that's moving the most. In any given scene, like whatever is moving the fastest, that's what your eye's gonna look at, right? So, because the assassin is spinning the entire time, he has all of the attention. He has all of your attention as you're watching him spin. And because No Name has essentially the same pose the entire time, he's kind of just there. So you're watching the assassin the entire time, and then he connects his attack right here. Okay, and I think the really cool thing about this attack right here, is that he actually transfers all of the force that he was spinning with, and now No Name is spinning, and now he is still the entire time. Right? So if you keep watching, he's moving the most, and now he has all of your attention, and this guy's pose is the same for the rest of this shot, like so, right? These aren't things that you think about as a viewer, but like you definitely feel it. Like your attention is something that the animators think about constantly, and so yeah, this is like one of my favorite moves in this fight, where he's just spinning and he transfers all the force and the attention to No Name, and the fight continues, and that's just, I don't know, man, that's so good. It's small stuff like that really impresses me.
Yeah, yeah, that's an incredible move. There's so much power behind it, and it feels so grounded.
Yeah,
You know that they shot reference of probably a couple of really good choreographers doing that move,
yeah,
because you can just feel it. You can feel it. You feel that transfer of inertia from the kick,
yep, yep, yep.
and it's cool to hear you talking um, about the movement of one character being transferred to the other, because I don't think about that as much when I'm storyboarding, because I'm not dealing with as much movement
Right.
as you guys are as animators, and uh, you know I think a lot about focal point when I'm boarding as being something that has to be controlled through composition.
I see.
Uh,
Yeah.
but focal point, that's another thing that comes into play, which is what thing is like doing the most in the scene. That's where we're gonna look.
Yeah. 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 When I framed through this the first time, I noticed so many things that were happening with it, that I just didn't catch before. Like for example, like this whole part where he slides and the snow sort of covers up the screen like this.
Yeah,
Um, from an animation viewpoint, like I feel like it's curious that it goes it there's this thing that happens where, all right, so he's sliding back and the snow is getting bigger and bigger around his foot, right? So it's getting bigger,
yeah,
it's getting bigger, and then there's this frame.
yeah,
There's one frame where the snow sort of disappears and then it fills up the screen again,
yeah.
and then it cuts to the next part. Um, there's something about that I think it ups the contrast and like the intensity of it when you have just like this one frame of like it breaks the sort of continuity of the snow.
Yep.
Even when it kind of doesn't make sense. when you if I think about it, it's like why would the snow disappear for one frame and then it would reappear.
Yep.
Um, but I've noticed that it happens a lot in this whole entire sequence where there there's always like this sometimes there's this one frame where it breaks the continuity of some sort of arc or some sort of like image. Um, is that something that you think about, Kev, when you're doing like storyboards and
Yeah,
other
dude.
related
For
art?
sure. No, it's a really common thing actually in action anime stuff. I've noticed it a lot. Um, and you're spot on with your hunch there. That's exactly what they're doing is just um, throwing a interruption in the in what would otherwise be a smooth arc
Right. In this case, it
to
would be the snow.
the snow growing into frame.
Right.
Um, but then there's that split second where I liken it to like um, lightning striking or like muzzle flashes in on camera where um, the shutter is moving at a speed in which it can't catch every muzzle flash.
Right.
So it makes this thing feel like it's happening really, really fast and intensely. Um,
Whew. And this is one
I
of those like really small details that you really, like it's literally one frame, right? It's so small, but it contributes to the overall feeling of the action, which is
yeah.
it just shows you
I,
like just how much they think about these small details, I feel like. Sorry I
I,
interrupted you, Kev.
I took a class from a painting class from a guy that was like this brilliant like still life painter. His name's Chong Wong, and he like I was like going through his sketchbook, and he had all these beautiful little landscape sketches. Most of them were just like of houses, and he he would do this thing where there was like if there was a house like up on a up here, this was like the path like leading to the house. And and then maybe like behind the house there's like a big mountain or some deal like this.
Yeah.
Um his lines like um he would have these little tick marks in them. So like there's this curve here and like as it's going up he would like put in this like double little hatch thing.
Oh.
And like are up here in the mountain like and it was this really subtle thing. Um and it just anytime that there was like a really long uninterrupted line you would see that and it looked a lot cooler and prettier than what this kind of crude thing that I'm doing here.
Right.
But, but like what it was, I asked him about it, and he'd never had someone ask him about it, and it was just like kind of intuitive, like artist thing that he was doing.
Can I take a guess at what it is that he's trying to accomplish with it?
Yeah,
Like, I mean, definitely, it sort of like it breaks up the line, obviously, but at the same time, it's sort of when I'm looking at it, when I see those like hatch marks, I start to chunk like the lines and sort of the space around it to like just like oh, there's this section and now there's this section and now there's this section, and then it creates like even more of like let's say a rhythm in the line and the painting as well because then it's not just that you have a line that leads to the door. It's like now there's like sections of the line and sections of that road that I can sort of like break up the painting into, which I think naturally your brain wants to chunk information, and so like when I see that, it's like it's pleasing for some reason.
Mhm.
I don't know. Like, what did he say about his
Yeah,
process with that?
yeah, dude. No, you nailed it. That's exactly what he's doing. Like, um, basically creating extra points of interest along these lines, where it's like leading the eye and letting it like rest in places where otherwise you got to think about lines as if they're pathways for the viewer's eye. And if it's like, and if you have these really long uninterrupted lines, the viewers just slides along it,
Yeah,
um, like they're on a freeway, um, at like really quickly because they're like, okay, that's just a smooth curve. Got it. Moving on.
right.
But instead, what he's saying is like, no, I want you to take a little bit more time with that line. So I'm just gonna throw in a little interruption there,
Yeah,
uh, and kind of like make it just slightly more interesting. So um, I think it's this is kind of related to what we were talking about.
no, it definitely is. I feel like it. Like I think in the example of the video, the interruption adds that interest to it. That I think we'll talk about a little bit more as the fight goes on because I feel like they do that repeatedly. Um, but dude, this is actually pretty cool to think about because I mean I don't have as much experience drawing or painting as much as you do, so I really love it when I see this like interconnectedness between the different departments of like little techniques that you do to add rhythm and interruption to your pieces of art. So this is cool, man. This is really cool. Have you adopted this to your style of work, Kev? Have you tried to add stuff like this with maybe it's not so much the exact hatch lines that that he was doing, but is that
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I definitely will. Like, I've just noticed. I mean, there's a million different ways you can do it, but like, um, I like I've taken a lot of design courses lately where, um, if we draw like if we draw like a little piece of architecture or whatnot, like I'm always trying to figure out because I quickly realized that if you like perfect lines, um, they're just not that interesting,
yeah,
and it's really easy to make a really boring perfect architectural drawing in Photoshop. Um, and what I try to do with my stuff is like I'll just like break it a little bit as I go along. I'll
yeah,
just like take a little nick out of the and I try to motivate this. I try to motivate this stuff and base it in reality rather than just putting random tick marks on my drawings.
yeah,
But because I can't, I'm not as smooth as this guy. I can't I can't get away with like just throwing stuff in there for no
right.
reason. But that yeah, essentially I'm doing the same thing, which is just like breaking up the what otherwise would be a perfectly smooth
Yeah,
surface.
yeah, I see that. It does add this interest to it. Do you do this for your storyboard? Did you do this for your storyboards? Because I feel like with storyboards, they're lower detail sort of drawings that you're just trying to get the gesture of actions. So would I see this in storyboards? Kev?
I don't know if you would see it in my line work because I'm not being as careful with it. Um, but in terms of Man, that's a good question. I'd have to kind of go back and look at some of my boards to see if that's happening.
Right.
But
Like maybe
yeah,
instinctively, like you're like you said, that other artist that you mentioned, like, he kind of does it just because, he sees the rhythm of the lines and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm just gonna add a little line here, whatever, or a little line here," and it's sort of
yeah, yeah.
unconscious in a way, like once you get to that level of, like, looking at um your your artwork.
Hmm.
Um let's move on to this next section right here. This is a really quick
Dude,
sort of,
real fast.
yeah.
That this shot right here, I have repurposed in like I want to say like 3 or 4 different Ruby fights.
This one right here where he slides into the frame.
Where he slides into the frame and then leaps right back into action. Like
Dude, I
it
feel like
can
I've
be,
seen that. I feel like I've seen that in your boards on Ruby, and even in
yeah, dude.
Ruby too.
It's perfect. It's like it's so. I'm constantly, as like an action board artist, I'm constantly looking for shots like that are sort of um, timeless and like can be taken out of context and put into any other situation and just work.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think there is like this simplicity to it that definitely, there's like there's this energy to it, obviously, that I think is so simple that you just have to use it, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, that's funny that you mentioned that because I do, yeah, dude. Do you remember your boards for Ironwood versus Watts?
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
at the very last section of the fighting, Ironwood like punches no, yeah, Ironwood punches Watts and he hits a beam. There's a
Oh
shot
yeah.
of it, basically this, where okay. It's not exactly similar to this, but it's exactly the same example of, like, there's a camera and then the character flies into the camera and then
Mm-hmm.
he hits a thing, um, and it's funny that you mentioned this because, like, you also showed me the reference for that, and that reference was from another fight in Sort of the Stranger. Um,
Oh shit. That's right. Yeah.
the
The whip
whip
fight.
guy in the beginning, yeah. Um, that's funny, man, and I love hearing stuff about this where, like, I really love the hearing the process of where artists are getting their inspiration. So this is fun, man. This is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
When I was framing through this, I thought it was super cool how they transitioned from this shot to this one. So I'm looking at the blocking of it essentially. So if we play it at speed, it feels like that, right? So he goes screen right in the beginning of it. So he goes like this, and then there's, like, he gathers himself. So there's like a little bit of a beat, and then he moves this way. And I really, really thought it was cool that if you look at the shapes and the lines of where he is on screen,
Mm-hmm.
if we draw that as to the shapes that he's taking up in the camera space, and we go to this one, you can
Mm-hmm.
draw a line like right here where he's taking up this basically 4/5 of the screen, and he's starting to move screen left. And what's happening with the camera is that the camera is actually moving at sort of like a continuation of his movement. But at the same time, if you look at the spacing of where your eye is sort of, you know, looking,
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's right on the other side of this line right here. Uh,
Yeah.
and I just thought, like, wow, that's a genius way to cut from like a close up to one of these sort of wider shots where you're looking at the entire environment, and keeping the action going at the same time. It's a very quick thing that happens. It's it's a very short shot, but I feel like I'm definitely gonna steal this and use it in a fight scene somewhere down the line for sure.
That's really cool. That's really cool, man. Yeah, I never noticed that. I think that that's that's like really perceptive of you that you picked up on that because we yeah, it cuts from this shot to a much different shot, but it doesn't. It takes us zero time to reorient ourselves.
Right. Yes.
Uh,
Yeah, dude. I think it also just comes back to just like really being like as a 2D animator, you have to be perceptive of like the overall fight and stuff. And so, no doubt, this was definitely something that they already had to figure out before they started even animating. And so I think at the same time, like as like an animator that works on a lot of fights, I think that good camera throughout the entire sequence is almost half of it. I feel like because everything's happening so fast, you have to make sure that your camera is working with the action so that you don't disorient the viewer. Because I feel like that's a really huge thing with fights is that it's really easy uh, to distract the audience from something that you don't want them to look at. And so when I was framing through it, I'm looking for things that they're doing to transition between the shots, because if you look at some of these shots, some of them are really really fast, some of them are like 12 frames, and I as an animator, I'm looking for techniques to really keep the momentum of the fight going. And so there's a lot of information out there just going from one shot to the next. And I think that's like a layout blocking thing that has a lot to do with camera, and a lot of staging as well. Oh man,
that shot's too good.
I'd like to hear your thoughts on this shot because I really love this shot as well, but I want to see what it is that you're picking up from it, Kev.
Um, well, it's a really specific camera angle that like it's it would be really just difficult to come up with this stuff. Sometimes I wonder if they had built a miniature of this set and done some like previs, honestly. Like
Hmm.
it wouldn't surprise me. Um,
Yeah,
because
but
this set is so
but at
specific
the
and
same time, it wouldn't surprise me either if he just came up with this. It's like
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
you're good, man. You know what you're doing. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's just like it's so cool that he's interacting with the set so much here, and yeah, there's that like 1, 2, 3 um, back and forth across the frame that he's doing. That's like just really pleasing to watch.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's a really cool rhythm to it, and I think as an animator, when I'm watching this, um, you know, I'm sure as like an artist as well, Kev. You learn a lot about simple versus complex, right?
Mm,
So in a drawing, with like you could have like a person standing, and half of them is like like a really simple line, but then the other half is like something that's a lot more Jesus, whatever. Like
is that some mouse drawing?
yes, let's say it's a mouse drawing.
Yeah,
But like even just in like poses, you have something that's like simple on this side because it's just a straight line, but then you have something complicated over here, and that
yeah,
contrast really gives you just like something pleasing to look at. And I think in animation as well, if you look at the motions of the movement, you can have the same thing, I think, with movement. So in these two characters, I would characterize right now the assassin guy to have a sort of a very complex relation to movement, because he's hopping all over the screen, and he's using the full width of the screen and the depth as well, and he goes like this. Um, and if you look at No Name, his arc is a lot simpler. Like he's sort of here, and he basically just keeps to the center of the frame,
Hmm.
and then he goes there. So I think there's this really nice balance between um, the simpleness of his movement. He's almost like going to a straight line to here, whereas the assassin guy's going like this, and it's a lot of
Hmm.
movement all over the screen. And I think that definitely contributes to the really cool rhythm that it has. And and yeah, and there's also like a few little things here with contrasting movements that I think is really nice to look at because he goes this way, and Nanashi, no name, goes that way. So you have this like this pulling apart of the two characters in the frame, and then you have them coming back in here. They're coming together, and then now they're going apart again. So it's like this really cool balance of contrast. Like it all, I think it all comes back to contrast, and I think this is contrast in movement, where they're coming apart, they're coming together, they're coming apart, but also at the same time, one of them is a complex movement and one of them is a simple movement, and that's animation, man. Like that's the basis of like what makes a lot of animation very appealing to people. So that's why
That's
I really love like this sequence right here. It's just so appealing to look at, I should say.
that's cool. That's cool. It's like dancing, that like coming apart and coming together
Yeah,
is that yeah that happens a lot in a lot of dancing, I think. And um, it's yeah, there's like a tension and then a release. That's really cool.
yeah, man. Yeah,
They're like rubber banded together, kind of. If you can kind of imagine that there's um like the two of them have like a rubber band around each other, and
yeah,
they're like one trying to get away from each other and then pulled back in. And it's like
yeah.
this tension.
Yeah, it's really fun, and I think definitely when you're animating something like this, you have to consider both of them sometimes as like one, like and how they both work together to create like a visually appealing, you know,
Hmm.
dance, you could say.
Hmm.
Yeah. Ooh. I really like how they're playing with depth here. So in this shot, you get both of them going away from camera, and then in the next shot, you have him sliding into camera.
Yeah.
And again, there's that contrast. It just works so well. And at the same
Yeah.
time, I think if you look at the lines in the going from this shot, which you could characterize it as sort of like this sort of diagonal,
Yep.
I'm pretty sure it follows through into there it is. There's that it's a parallel line that moves
Yep.
into the next shot, which is sort of like an establishing shot in a way of like to remind you like, hey, this is where they are, and I think that's super important, Kev. Like, can you talk a little bit about like how you mix up your shots when you're storyboarding to include like stuff like this, where it pulls out sometimes for just like a second, just to remind you like, hey, this is where they are, and then you go back to like a close-up shot or a mid shot.
Dude, well, I mean, I think what you pointed out here, it's doing the same thing that you were talking about earlier with his face, and then we cut out to the wide, and it's that right back to Mr. Bruce Block's book. Um, you're gonna have to remind me the name. Yeah, Visual Story.
There it is.
Uh, um, yeah, continuum of movement, scientific term. Where yeah, I don't know if he coined that. I feel like he did. I feel like he made that up to sound smart. But
It does sound smart. So.
It was basically what he was talking about was like how much your eyes have to move across the frame to get to to the next focal point
Right.
between shots. With that, and then that was what he was calling the continuum of movement. And like what they're doing here is like cutting from it. What was like an extreme close up of No Name's foot in the snow to yeah, a wide, pretty wide shot of the two of them fighting, and there's poof, clouds of snow and all kinds of shit going on. But you have that diagonal line that's cutting all the way across the frame, and it's consistent between the both shots, which is really cool. And it just makes it so we don't have to figure out where we are. We
Yeah.
know it's telling us this. We know that this beam runs that way, and so we know that when we cut here, we're looking at that same beam. And I think that cutting wide in the middle of a fight it shows a lot of maturity. Uh,
Maturity.
yeah, I think it's a way of like showing that you have a good handle on your fight scene, and you're like not anxious to show your viewers um, everything all at once.
Oh,
and
I see. Yeah.
and like I forget who it was that said like someone said something about like that's the sign of an anxious artist. I don't remember
Ooh.
what that sign was. I forget now, but the anxious artist part stuck with me because I feel like I'm a pretty anxious artist.
Dude, if you remember, please let me know, man, because I feel like maybe that could be me too. I don't know. Dude, yeah, like there's some director, I forgot who it was, but in terms of like the overall sequence of movies, I think he said something to the effect of like it's always a good idea to bring back the camera and remind everybody where we are. Like it's always a good idea to do that every now and then because I think it definitely, yeah, it gives you like this larger perspective and it also like stages the characters so that you know like, oh, this is where they are in relation to one another, and I also think it's sort of like a breather as well, like we talked about earlier, where it's just like you're not focusing on all these intense camera angles and you kind of just pull back a little bit, which I think I definitely agree with you. Where it's not, it shows maturity, because it's like you're not so anxious to say, oh hey, look at how cool this sword swing is, and oh hey, look at this cool moment that we've dialed in on. It gives you a moment to sort of like sort of slow it down a little bit, which I also think helps with the pacing. It's like when you have all those mid shots and those super close ups, it's really intense, man. And I
Yeah,
think when you pull back to something like this, uh, you catch your breath a little bit, and it also has that contrast of like a little bit slower, and then once you get back into it, it's like you're back into it.
yeah, dude. I mean, there's also like an added danger. Um, it's adding like an element of holy shit, like look at how high up they are.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
like if they fall off of this, they're dead type thing, which we wouldn't know otherwise.
Right. If you had not zoomed out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, this is a thing that as I was framing through, I noticed, and I might be wrong, Kev. I might be making this up, but um,
Probably.
so so look at like I feel like look at where we're looking at the very last frame on this shot. Okay, so like right about here. Let's say we're looking in this area, okay? And I
Yeah.
think we're looking in that area because the characters are there, but at the same time, you have these leading lines of this background, of this one, and of this one, okay?
Yeah.
And then you go to this one, and screen space wise, your eyes are still at this circle. So let's say it's here. right? So you go from there to there. So you're looking there, but
Yeah.
at the same time, am I crazy, Kev, or are these stairs also leading lines here?
Mm,
And this sort of frames out, the whole thing. So
hmm.
if I'm looking at these lines, it almost creates like an X, So if you go from here to here, you
Yeah.
have uh, you have these stairs that are going like this, and if you go back, you have this line that goes like this, and if you go back and forth, it's like both of the images, when watched back to back, create an X to make sure you're looking there.
That's awesome.
Am I making this up, or are they geniuses, or am I a genius for seeing
I
it?
think I think you're the genius, and that you should take the credit for this competition.
No, because I feel like it's like there aren't many accidents when it comes to framing up art. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
you're at that level where you understand uh, just how much of an impact a line has on
Yeah.
even a single frame like that, and I think that this is something
That's
that
why that's why animation stresses me out
because you
because it's
have
like
control over everything.
because because like I can understand like framing up a shot and making it work, but you have to frame up 24 shots a second and make sure they all work. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, dude, no, it's it does feel like a lot of work, but it's also much more rewarding because of that, right? And I'm sure
Yeah.
you felt that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I fucking love the snow right in that shot. It's just so chunky and delicious.
Chunky. Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
look at that.
Dude, he slices one of the chunks of snow.
Does he really? Oh my god, look at that.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I didn't notice that.
Wow. I didn't notice that either. Man. Yeah, one thing I noticed in this shot right here, I thought it was cool, was that when you're going from this shot to this shot,
Hmm.
look at the pose that he's in here. It's
Hmm.
just he's upside down, but then the next shot he's already right side
Hmm.
up,
Hmm.
which I thought was really cool. Just framing through it, when you're watching it, it's all one continuous motion. But God, that just they're cutting out a few frames to add to the intensity and
Yeah.
to show how fast he's moving in the air, which I thought was really cool. And I have not done that in any of my animations work. So, a lot of the things that I'm mentioning here, Kev, pertaining to animation, at some point I will steal and put it in my work. So,
Yep.
I feel
Yep.
it prudent to mention all the things that I'm learning about this because I am learning so much about this um, because I really haven't framed through it, when I first watched it.
Hmm.
But yeah, man, I'm learning a lot, and I think there's this one cool thing that my professor in college said. He said he said pertaining to like really good animation on film, he was like, there are no secrets because everything that you see is on the screen. So
Hmm.
study it because it's that's the work of like really great artists, and he's right. Like there are no secrets because the the things that they're doing to make it so good you can see on screen. So yeah, man, this is real fun for me. By the way, Kev, I'm having a lot of fun.
Me too, man.
Cool. By the way, stop me or stop at any time if you have any given thoughts on anything that I'm going through right now, whether it be the sets or staging or whatever.
For sure.
Yeah. Oh. One really cool thing going from ooh, let's see, it's so so Kev, we mentioned earlier interrupting, like let's say a straight line or like a smooth arc. And I feel like they do that a lot when they're cutting in this fight. And I mean, so, and I mean that by, if I were to go back to here. So let's say, I think this is an example where you're not interrupting where your audience's eye is. Okay,
Yeah.
so your audience's eye is, here in this circle, and then you go
Yep.
to the next scene, it's exactly the same place. And I
Yep.
think there's a couple of cool things that they do uh, where if I'm like looking at stuff like this, well, this might not be the best example. There's another example later on that I looked at, but if we're looking at the action of this sword here, okay, it's going this way, and we cut, and there's nothing here, right? So we cut, and we're sort of looking at this line here that's not there yet, but then it gets there. It gets there a frame later,
Yeah.
which I thought was another great example of like that interrupting the rhythm just to add this really cool contrast, which they do a few other times in this fight, and I'll point them out if I see them. But I just thought that was really a cool thing, and a lot of these cool things that I'm mentioning are just things that I hadn't thought about, man. Like I think if I were doing this, like I would have cut to this frame from the beginning.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
awesome.
it's yeah, it's just a one frame difference too, man,
Mhm.
and it's
But
that
it's not an accident.
exactly.
It's it feels like a lot of the stuff feels like it's been shot like this is just like a live action shoot, and there's like so much happening that is it feels unplanned almost, but it's actually just like really meticulously planned.
You might be right, man, because I feel like when things are happening really fast, the camera is struggling to get the action. So
That's what I'm saying. It feels like a cameraman's trying to keep up
yeah,
with these guys,
yeah,
which is amazing.
yeah. Another really cool thing I think in this particular section is that, well, one, we have this horizontal line moving throughout this sequence, right? So horizontal lines, and then it meets a perpendicular line in his sword that
Mm,
stops it, which I
yeah.
think is really, really cool. And then here's something that I'm also definitely gonna steal. If we're gonna, he does this move where he blocks it and then he goes on the offensive, and then he swings like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's play that speed really quick just to feel it. And I think what's really cool about this is that it's the continuum of movement that we mentioned earlier. Because if we're looking at the sparks, right? There's one here, and let's say it's here. We actually cut to another shot right here.
Hmm.
So it's going this way, going this way. It's going this way. Let me see if I could turn on ghosting so that you could see. Does this work? Let's see. Boom. Okay, cool. So if you look at the arc of it all, it's gonna go this way,
Hmm.
and it's that continuum of movement between two shots, right? And it's a seamless transition because you're looking at the arc of the sparks, which I thought
That's
was
cool.
super cool, man. It was a seamless transition, which is what you want in a fight scene because you want the momentum of the fight to keep going, and you don't want people to notice the camera cuts, you know. Um, by the way, as I was framing through this is like the attack that cuts his eye when they have the a little bit later on that I just noticed, which I think is pretty cool that I missed the first time on viewing it. Um, but yeah, no, continuing movement, and then they take this break, and then they stare at each other.
Dude, the back flipping right there,
Yeah,
it if it to me, I've always thought that that felt kind of weird.
because
It feels out of character
really,
for him to me.
oh man, I think I disagree, Kev, because he flips a lot in all of his attacks and stuff. You know, what is it that's out of character for him? Is it that he's backing away from a fight? That aspect of it?
Yeah, it's like almost kind of showy, um, and like in like yeah, impractical amounts of flipping. Um, Personally, yeah, maybe it's just a taste thing. I wish
Right.
they would have cut down a couple of the flips there. But that's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
You know, I can live with it.
Yeah, no, I mean I think that's a fair take. It is only two flips though. I would it's only two. Um but that's fine.
His arm looks funny in this shot. The one arm looks like beefier than the other.
Oh yeah. Wow. Who knows, man? Maybe they're referenced. Um One thing I appreciate about this section is, they're taking a breather, lets the audience also, take a rest as well. But, they're taking a moment to show the stakes as well because it's like, hey, look at this blood, they're getting injured. Um, and I think in the next few shots they'll show the kid as well, and I think that's also like a reminder of the stakes, like we mentioned, where it's like these fights mean something, and we're reminding you of the stakes of what they're fighting for and where they are, and everything sort of adds to this sort of urgency and this sort of life or death feeling that we have. And I think, yeah, I think that's definitely necessary, and I think a lot of those shots. They do it pretty well without you having to like think too much about it.
Yeah.
I think it's cool that so they show the blood here in the foot, and then they bring down the sword, okay, which I thought was weird initially, but because they brought down that sword in that last shot, and then it shows the blood on his cheek in this shot, I think it connects the two, where you're just like you see the sword and you think, oh, that's a sword, and then this is the result of that sword, which is the cut on his face. And I thought that was a pretty smart thing to do linearly, like look to push the story forward, because otherwise, I feel like again, if I had done this, I probably wouldn't even have thought about showing the sword. But I think it's bridging that gap for the audience to easily see like the connection between everything that we're seeing. And then they show the kid to show the stakes again.
I like that they skipped on drawing the dog's butthole. They could have easily drawn the dog's butthole in that shot, but they were like,
What? What are
"No,
you?
that's gonna be distracting."
Oh, like right here. I didn't even think of that, but I feel like Kevin, do you draw dogs' buttholes in the storyboards that I've seen, or what? Because
I mean, I don't think I ever got to do a scene with Zwei. I'm sure if Yunhao was in charge of one of those scenes, we'd be seeing a lot of dog buttholes.
this was a
This
cool,
is dope, by the way.
yeah, this
This
was a
whole
cool little moment, where he
yeah
appears so menacingly.
yeah.
Look at that frame. Wow.
Um, there's a shot in I'm gonna see if I can find it real quick.
Yeah.
Um, have you seen Ninja Batman?
I've seen parts of it, just the fight parts on YouTube. The animation in that is really good.
I know. It's really fun. I swear they do something. I swear Joker does something in the last fight here that's like, oh yeah, here it is.
Have you seen that movie, Kev?
Yeah.
I do remember seeing clips, and um, am I correct in remembering that there was a ton of bats that came together to create one giant Batman?
I think that's yeah. I'm pretty sure that's this one. There's some wacky shit that happens.
Right.
Um, look at this. Look at this though. This is great. Um, super. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
So there's Joker. He fades into the smoke. Look at that.
Ah, yeah.
I don't know.
That's very similar energy to this.
Yeah. I was just like, every once in a while, if you watch enough of this fight stuff, you're like, oh, they got that from that, and
That's pretty cool.
um, it's a nice reminder that like even the pros are stealing from other pros.
Although stealing is not the word we would prefer.
Right, right. Just borrowing.
Right.
I fucking love that shot. That jump spin he does is so awesome. Mm.
So that's his whole thing, man. Like he just loves to jump and do these spins and flips, which I think I feel like they just made him do that just cuz, like
Mm.
to establish that sort of movement as a character, which, I
Mm.
definitely appreciate, but at the same time, a lot of it does seem unnecessary.
Sure, you're right. Yeah, that's pretty flowery. Now that I think about it.
Right. Even that.
Oh, that stuff was great.
Yeah. No, it looks great. Um
Mm.
so I'm not complaining. I think as far as the sequence goes, I think it's fun that in this shot they're sort of so in this shot it feels like he's coming into camera, and then the next
Yeah.
shot it feels like the camera's coming out of that guy's face, uh, which I thought was a cool thing. And then this feels like a very like sort of horizontal movement to the camera, but then when you cut it, they're both running into the camera, which I think it's also always fun when you're playing with death that way. And
Mm.
at the same time, a lot of good animation and even storyboarding is silhouette, right? So like even in this section right here, I feel like there was probably a lot of thought into um, looking at their silhouette as one, and trying to distinguish shapes
Mhm.
from the one giant shape that they are,
Yeah.
which I think is a hard thing to do, to honestly. Um, so it's like
Yeah.
if you're
Without
consider,
without without telephoto's lens.
yeah, you really have to think a lot about how both of the shapes are one, and then they are separate, and then they're one again. It's like this right here.
Yeah.
Sword, other sword, hand, other hand.
Yeah, I mean, as a silhouette read, that's garbage.
Right, it's
Like,
really hard to see what's happening, you know.
but it's awesome because like I don't know, they just have so much control over what they're doing that it works.
Yeah. Yeah, this is difficult to do, man.
Yeah.
That specific shot. Oh, I love this shot. This right here, I don't know what it is about this. There's just so much energy to it. So good.
I bet I bet you there's some disappearing frames if we were to go through. I bet you there's some swords disappearing.
Really.
Oh, oh wait, no, I thought for a second
Oh,
that you.
wait, let's see.
Well, okay, they just like really blur them out, but
Yeah. That's
kind of the
cool.
same idea.
Something I noticed when framing through it, he cuts No Name's ear right here.
Oh God,
Yeah.
that he should get that checked out.
Here's the thing, like you don't really notice it again because I think his hair covers it, like coincidentally, you know. So, but man, like there's a lot of details in this fight that you miss. But maybe you're not supposed to focus on it too much, you know.
Dude, that's the best kind of storytelling and filmmaking and image making is when on top of like the what on top of what you see when you first look at it or watch it, there is a whole there are like six other levels of stuff that you feel that you don't even realize is happening
Yeah,
until you get in until you go back through it and frame through the damn thing. It's like I could never have told you that he cut his ear there, but like
yeah,
we feel it.
absolutely. And I wonder, like, you know, it's probably something that they even really wanted to do. They were probably like, hey, let's have them cut his ear, and a lot of the other artistic elements were put in to have this work, but you know, you don't really notice any of that. You know, it all sort of works around it, but it doesn't need to be a huge beat where you know they stop the camera and it's like oh hey, look at his ear, you know. They just keep going with it, but I feel like it's important to have those details because it informs a lot of the other things that you're doing.
Dude, you know what would be a dope, um, a really cool thing to have is um, I wonder if this exists anywhere, but this fight without the score would be really really cool to just hear all of the sound effects and without any
Oh, well, what do you imagine that to be like?
dude intense. I think it would take the intensity to like oh it would take it so much higher.
I mean, I
Oh
definitely agree because, like, you know, have you? I'm sure you've watched the like Naruto Sasuke fight, right? Like the when they're like the very last one near the end.
ha- oh yeah, the one with the flashbacks mixed into it.
Uh, yes, yes, but there is a part where I think when the fight hits its climax where they're both like ridiculously tired and they can't like you know use their best jutsus anymore, and it becomes like this slog of a fist fight, and
Okay.
it's just the sound effects, and there's no score, and
Yeah.
it's just like I think a minute and a half of them going at it where it's like it's so intense, dude. Like it because they took away the score, and it's just punches landing, and it's just them breathing super hard, and them taking a lot of breaks because they're so damn tired. Oh, it's so
Mm-hmm.
good. It's so good. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but at the same time, I feel like the score in here, it's like it also it makes me feel a certain way when I'm watching it. It's like it's sort of his theme, No Name's theme. Like you hear it when he shows up in a lot of other places in the movie. But I feel
Yeah.
like with the score, I feel like it's there. it's building up the tension as well. Um,
Definitely.
but no, I think it would be kind of cool to see
I
it
don't
without the
know.
score.
I don't know. It I'm of the school where anytime you can take out the score, it's a good thing.
Really? Oh, ooh.
I could
Are you because
all my favorite action scenes have like very limited use
I see
of music.
because it amplifies the realness of it, and at the same time, like it, because there, I think there could be instances where the score is there to sort of to patch up any holes in the actual thing that you're watching. You know, where it's sort of like overcompensating for a lack of something in the original thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. You know, like I think that I think that music is huge, is really important in film, but I don't think it's important in action scenes.
Okay.
I I like action scenes without music, um, because they don't tell you how to feel, because it's unfolding in front of you, and you as a viewer get to figure out how you should feel about what's happening.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I feel like that's another sort of instance where it's like the maturity of the filmmakers is showing through, where it's like, no, we're just gonna let this thing play out. We think it speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Um, you can feel about how you'd like. I was watching Saving Private Ryan with my wife the other day, and it was the first time she'd seen it, and that's one of my favorite movies of all time. But I was realizing, and she doesn't watch war movies very often, and I was like, this is the war movie. Like, um, I was just realizing that there was a very limited score in the action scenes of that movie, um, and
Yeah.
especially in the last one. And people are dying. Like all of our favorite characters are dying, and the score doesn't tell you that.
Right.
Um, it's a really cool thing.
Yeah.
I love
Cool. Yeah. No. Like the thing that you're watching should stand on its own. You know, and it doesn't
that.
need the score to tell. Yeah. Yeah. I get that. Oh, there's a really interesting thing that happens here, Kev.
His
Um,
blood with the chicken blood. Is that what you're going for?
no. Uh, I, we can talk about the chicken blood later, but I think they do this one. It's I don't know what to call it, but like let's say there's a line here, okay,
Mm,
and it's the cut, right, and then you just the background doesn't change.
okay,
It's him, I guess, moving backwards from the
sure.
hit. Um, but I think it's cool that they zoomed in on this line, and that line is still there, and then the camera goes to that same diagonal, um,
Mm,
which is which was really cool because I didn't notice this part right here. That was just like something that I felt when I watched it,
yeah.
and it was this sort of like really cool way of using a close up that becomes a mid type of a shot, and you're using this diagonal to sort of patch the two together, which is really clever, I think, and really cool. Also, look, hey, he gets his hair sliced off.
Oh shit! Look at that.
That's fun. That is fun.
Wait, wait. Go back. Go back. It looks like it pops off, and then it's like
It's
awesome.
oh, the other
They
hair.
were like, they were like, you should get his hair cut off here, and then like, oh, never mind.
Yeah, he looks weird. Let's just it grows back. Hey, there's the chicken blood. That way.
Dude, just a quick aside on the chicken blood. You know, that stuff's gonna turn brown like really, really fast. I don't know if you realize
That's funny. Well, which would lead you to believe that maybe they built this entire huge thing just for this one day, and then they're never
that.
gonna use it again, just like the Olympics or something. You know?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's funny. Um,
Like when people painted things red in like ancient times, they didn't use blood, right? I don't.
yeah.
I don't know a lot about how pigment is made,
The best reds are from blood, Kev. Obviously.
but
Oh.
yeah, that's what I should be using for my paintings.
um, this is something that I'm gonna steal as well. Where this diagonal that you have here, it's so cool, man. It's
Mm,
of the beam, and it's the same thing here.
hmm. Hmm.
Um, I mean, it's a super easy thing to do in 3D, where you just take the camera and you just rotate it in Z, just a little bit.
Yeah,
But
sure.
I feel like it adds so much to the continuity of everything, which is really cool.
Dude, there's that rubber band thing,
Oh yeah, I did. Like right here.
uh, like they're slung together and they're both moving but coming back in. It's really cool.
Yeah. Whew. Strong. Dude, this moment right here. Initially, when I first watched it, I didn't think too much of it, but I feel like it's so cool. It's just a really short sort of snippet of their character, where the assassin guy is clearly enjoying this, man. Like, look at his face. He loves to fight, and you can see that throughout this fight. And this is really cool of No Name. Like, he breathes on his blade, and you get this warmth of his breath on it, which is really cool. But at the same time, I think in terms of like the story, if you remember, the kid once asked him if he had like a nickname, and he said something to the effect of Red Demon, and this is just sort of them showing like, oh, this is that super tough killer that he was known for, and even like just like this red that you see around his eyes. In one of the previous shots, it was like a blood splatter from another assassin that he killed, but I'm sure they probably were like, oh yeah, let's get some red on his face to really push that red demon sort of a
Hmm.
persona.
That's right. He was like virtually blind for a good part of this scene. I forgot about that.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was really cool. Shit.
Okay, there are so many things that happen like right here that I've missed when I first watched it, but like I never really thought twice about it because the energy of it just sort of moves everything along.
Yeah.
So like,
They cover a lot of ground in the next like 5 seconds.
right, yeah, like there's this slash that breaks his sword right here.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm pretty sure a piece of the sword flew this way and cut him. Um, and then he, between that shot and this, that's his broken sword right there. He lets go of the sword to catch his sword like this. Like there's so much that happens within like this little moment. And then he does this movement, picks up his broken sword, and I didn't really realize this when I first watched it, but he throws this sword. He throws this sword to No Name, and it impales him in the arm.
Right.
And I think I was very confused when I first saw this because if you look at the arc of this, it goes like this. But then once it gets here, if you're watching it at speed, it sort of goes the other way.
Mm.
So I was sort of confused
Hmm.
when I watched it. But then you get a little moment to slow down and see what's happening with that second shot when he's falling down. There's a lot happening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Oh, one really cool thing that I noticed that I'm probably going to steal from this as well is if I look at the energy of this shot right here, it's going to the side, right? And he's sort of gone. And then the energy of this shot is going perpendicular to that, going this way.
Hmm.
Um, I just thought that was really energizing.
Hmm. This is crazy. Like he suddenly turned into the freaking like Hulk. I
Yeah.
don't like just breaking through buildings. I don't even know.
Jesus.
Yeah, this part gets a little out of hand, but I mean it's still all really well executed.
Right, like look at all the destruction, you know.
Yeah,
Who
that is that is brutal. I love that. Like, what a painful
this right here?
place to get stabbed. And like you can imagine, I don't know. I feel like that blade must be like between his radius and his ulna.
Oh man.
At least that's how I can only that,
Right.
which is just brutal.
Yeah, dude. Ooh. Yeah, you could really just the way that he's moving and sort of struggling and the facial expression, it really adds to that sort of like urgency and sort of like I wouldn't say desperation, but there's like this like oh shit, oh shit, oh shit sort of a feeling. And I love this like the way that his pace picks up.
Mm.
Yeah. Dude, I always really loved this ending. Specifically, the way that they go past each other here, and then they
Mm.
both turn around.
Yeah, the fact that they pass each other is really good. Did they pass each other twice, or is it
Uh,
okay? So yeah, he flips over him,
yeah,
and so he passes him once,
right.
passes him a second time.
And then they go past each other, and then they come back for it.
That's really cool.
That's yeah, dude. That's great. It's so cool, man. I have no other words for it. I also really love that they really kept a lot of the diagonals similar here, and then you go here, and this
Mm.
diagonal is like this. And once you combine the two diagonals that they're looking at, it remains the same for the last final shot, which I mean, it's the little simple things like that that uh, are really cool to look at. I think.
I reference this part heavily for when Yang and Blake kill Adam.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah. Did you work on that scene?
No, no, I think I was on Genlock for that. Kev, okay, I have one last question for you, man. I know you gotta go. I know you got stuff to do, but
We made it to the end.
we did.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we talked a lot about like all the things that we're seeing with lines and structure and shapes in the beginning, and you see that repeatedly throughout the entire thing. But you don't need to. We don't need to like point out it happening every single time. Um,
Sure.
but yeah, we definitely covered a lot, and I had a lot of fun. And I think when I look back at this scene, I always think about this ending right here, and I always think about like um, how important it is for the way in which a fight ends. Like a fight, I feel like when you put a lot of thought into the story and the plot and these characters, you know, it can't just be a simple swipe of the sword and one of them dies. There's always some sort of symbolic sort of meaning as to how somebody dies or how somebody loses a fight, and And I was wondering what your thoughts were on why this fight ended the way it ended, Kev. And I'm also curious about your experience working on storyboarding, in which you've done a lot of fights, obviously, and how big of a part is the story? How big is it? How much does that influence what the actions that you take to end a fight are? If that makes sense.
Hmm. This is a tough one, dude. Hmm. I'm ending things. Man, I'm not a writer. I have I have a lot of trouble ending things. And the coming up with a satisfying ending has never been a big focus of mine. Um, but well, I guess you know. Let me ask you what is it about this fight, the way that this fight ends, that is important to you?
Okay. Well, the way I see this fight ending is that these two fighters are essentially very much similar, let's say. And I think they show that by having them both strike each other at the same time. So you have this similarity of just what they would both do, and shown through an action. Okay, and so it's not shown here because I the clip is kind of short, but um, a couple shots after here, it's revealed that Nanashi definitely stabbed this guy, but this guy missed Nanashi because there was a crystal in his chest that deflected the sword. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and the crystal was something that he received from the kid as a thank you for helping the kid. And so I think what that symbolizes is that the kid saved him physically, but also metaphysically.
Mm,
And so I think what they might be drawing like a similarity between the two is that these are both assassins, right? Nanashi has definitely killed a lot of people, and this guy is definitely an assassin that kills people. But then, how do you show their difference? And the difference is not just their skill, but like the choices that they made throughout the movie, where Nanashi, because he stopped killing people and helped out this kid, the kid saved him. He has this crystal, and that's sort of tying in the plot to the actual physical actions that the fight ends on. And so I think when you look at it broadly, they're the same character, but one of them was saved by the kid, let's say, right? And so
yeah.
here's another thing like that I was thinking about, like how do you end fights? How should somebody lose, and how should that reflect in the plot? So, Kev, have you watched the Rise of Skywalker?
I have. Yeah.
Okay, so the ending of the big fight was when Rey was fighting against Palpatine, right?
Mm,
And
mm-hmm.
so I often was thinking like, man, so if Rey strikes down Palpatine, she becomes a Sith,
Mm,
and that's what he wants. But at the same time, it's not in her nature to just kill, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, so how did they make that fight end? They had it. They set everything up so that Palpatine would use the Force lightning on her, and she reflects it back with the two sabers of Luke and Leia, right? So like the two people that like have pushed her to grow to this character that who she is, and so
Mm-hmm.
both of those sabers symbolize both of them helping her become this character, and it reflects the lightning that Palpatine is throwing at her. So she
Yeah.
didn't kill Palpatine. Palpatine killed himself, um, and that ties into sort of the plot when you think about it. And I think well choreographed fights have to end in a certain way that's meaningful to the plot physically. I mean, I know that's not always the case, but I think a lot can be said to that effect. For example, and this is sort of a rant, Kev, but I saw this video on YouTube about the ending of Lord of the Rings,
Uh-huh.
and so it was saying, dude, it was sort of a profound video where it was saying that the message of Lord of the Rings isn't that good defeats evil. The message is that evil defeats evil. And so J.R.R. Tolkien like showed it by having Frodo get to that point in the volcano where he's about to drop the ring into the lava, but he
Hmm.
doesn't. But he doesn't. The ring has a power over him, and so like he could never conquer the ring. Like as good as he was as a person, he could not conquer evil. But Gollum was there, and Gollum, because of his greed and his evilness, he fought with Frodo for the ring, and as a result of that evil,
Yeah.
it defeated the other evil of the ring, and they both fell into the fire, right? And so in the end, it was like it was saying that evil is powerful and it's strong, and good is not as strong as evil, but when you let it play itself out, evil defeats evil. I'm not explaining this the correct way, Kev, but or in the most succinct way, but I mean I think about it a lot about how to end things, and
That's really cool. Dude, yeah, yeah. That's one of my favorite like storytelling moments of all time because Gollum um he without him like nothing would have worked.
right,
He like from the very beginning, like he was such a crucial um cog in the whole plan to get to defeat Sauron, which is like um I don't know. Tolkien I mean that's really interesting. I never thought about it that way. Like Gollum is and like the Hobbit that he was before he was Gollum is such an insignificant being in the whole scheme of that world,
yeah,
and I feel like there's something to that, like um, to his insignificance, and that Tolkien was trying to like just show like how something so small can defeat something so big.
yeah. No, it's
But
profound on a few levels, man. If we really get into it, it's like there's definitely a lot going on there, you know.
oh, but yeah, I guess a little bit off track with Lord of the Rings, but I'm a huge Loader fan, so I could talk about that forever.
Yeah, we could
But
talk about that in another one of these for sure. Uh,
in terms of in terms of
in terms of ending things, ending
and
fights.
you know, um, you've got you're absolutely right. It's got to there has to be a point to the fight. The characters that are in the fight have to be in a different place at the end of it. There has to be some sort of um, change in their um, change in their state of mind, or the change in their um, kind of where they're heading.
Yeah,
Uh, that's like the whole point of a scene and a fight, and the fight is just another scene. So um, as long as it moves the plot forward, um, and something I love about one of my favorite things about this fight is just how short it is. Um, I
yeah,
think that the best things in art are pretty short and sweet.
yeah. They're not complicated.
No,
Yeah,
no, it's not. It's very clear what's going on. So you just kind of get to enjoy this little ride, and they uh, they get through it. They get through it really quickly, and it's just jam packed with amazing moments. But you don't want to even breathe while it's happening.
yeah.
Uh, which is pretty amazing.
Any
Well,
last
I
thoughts?
learned a lot from this fight, man.
Dude, same here, man. Yeah, I was gonna ask you like any last thoughts on this fight as a whole, or whatever. I know you also wanted to talk a little bit about VizDev, which unfortunately we didn't spend too much time on, but you know.
No, I mean it's all the same. It's all the same stuff to me. A lot of the stuff we were talking about in here, I'm usually thinking of when I'm doing concept art too. Um, and I think that I don't know the way my brain works is it's always about like how things are related to other things, which is like what excites me about art and like music and
Yeah.
storyboarding and concept art and how it's all like tied together and the same like fundamentals just work for it all.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm always trying to look like I'm always interested in what like the secret sauce is, kind of like ties it all together.
Right. Do you think there is a secret sauce that all art shares?
I think so. Um,
Will you tell me what it is when you find out, man? Because
well, you know what? I think I think that well, it's kind of like physics, right? Like Hawking is trying to like find what the one equation is that explains everything.
okay.
um, I kind of I wonder sometimes if there's like something like that for art as well. Um,
a u- a universal formula for art.
yeah, but I think the closest that I think the closest you can get to something like that when talking about art is contrast.
I agree, man. Yeah,
I
I think I see that much more repeatedly and through different disciplines of art than other things. You know, contrast for sure.
Yeah, yeah. A difference between things is like fundamentally like what we're about as human beings, like visually
Yeah.
and audibly. We want to like compare and contrast, like what makes things different. Which is just a fascinating thing to play with, I think. And of course, this scene does an amazing job of playing around with that.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, I definitely agree. I mean, it's like it's you know, I think you can apply that to a lot of art, which is, you know, analyzing rhythm, but also looking for things that break up that rhythm in a appealing way to show that contrast, right?
Mm.
Um, yeah, I definitely see that a lot in animation, and from what you're telling me, and from what you know, I'm hearing from a lot of other artists, is for sure that that's definitely a thing that that is a big factor into why some things are successful for different departments. So yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a good place to look for
Mm.
when it comes to finding that universal formula for art. You know.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and thirds. Put everything put everything on a third. Do everything in threes.
But I feel like that's also that comes back to contrast, right? I feel like that's
Yeah,
is it though? I feel like it is. You know, it's uneven spacing really when you think about it. It's not, you know, on a half. It's on a
yeah,
third, which is yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think
Um,
you're right.
yeah, dude, cool. Kevin, hey man, thank you so much for taking the time, man. I really appreciate it, and I had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot, honestly. So thank you, man. Honestly.
It's really fun to hear your thoughts about this scene and talk openly about it with you and hear your perspective because um, I I think it's just one of those scenes that we can constantly go back to and repurpose all the brilliant tools that it's using, storytelling devices, and um, you know I think you're a baller animator,
Oh,
Peter.
thanks, Kev.
I think that every time you got a hold of my boards, I got excited because I knew that whatever idea I planted in that in the those storyboards, you were going to take that idea and like make it 10 times cooler than I had it pictured in my head.
I want to
That's,
say it's easy to do that because they were your boards, Kev. Because they were already good to begin with. I was like, all right, like my job's easy because it's already here. You know. I appreciate that, Kev. I really do appreciate that. Yeah, no, like obviously, well, maybe not obvious, but like I think you're a great artist, man. Like, and I think you know that, but I haven't said it as much. But dude, I think the work that you do is really cool, man. And I think you have that passion to get better at it all the time, which is inspirational, man. I do feel like when you talk about your relationship to art and how it's obsessive sometimes, it's like a passion that I think is encouraging, because it just reveals that like there's just so much out there that we can do with art, and and it's sort of beyond us in a way, but yeah, what you're doing with it, man, it's really exciting for me to watch, and I'm also excited to see like where you end up and what you do with it, man.
Thanks for saying all that, Peter. That means a lot, bro.
Hey, of course, dude. I should say it more often, but yeah. Oh, by the way, hey, you could see his cut in his ear right here.
Oh damn, it was way worse than
It
that.
was, yeah, it was hanging by a thread, but
Oh, that's great.
all right, cool, Kevin. All right, thanks for your time, man. Hopefully we can do another one of these for something even more cooler.